Coming up on Primetime News, high-level defense talks between South Korea and the U.S. kick off here in Seoul. Countering recent North Korean threats is the focal point. On the first day of his state visit to the U.S., Chinese president seeks to reassure American business leaders about its economy and pledges to work with Washington in the fight against cybercrime. Plus, while some major financial institutions expect the Korean economy to grow a little over 2% this year, the country's top central banker dismisses such concerns, citing improving domestic spending. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, September 23rd. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
Speculation builds that North Korea will conduct some form of provocation next month to mark its key anniversary.
And that's why deterring and countering the threats top defense talks between Seoul and Washington. Connie Kim starts us off.
Discussing efforts to shore up the South Korea-U.S. military alliance and ways to counter North Korea's nuclear missile threats topped the annual senior-level defense dialogue on Wednesday. Seoul's Deputy Minister for Policy at the Defense Ministry, Ryu Jae-sing, led the South Korean delegation at the Korea-U.S. Integrated Defense Dialogue. The U.S. was represented by Abraham Denmark, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, and Elaine Bunn, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear and Missile Defense Policy. Stressing that strengthening combined defense readiness is a purpose of the defense talks, Yu said deterring North Korean threats is the most important issue.
With North Korea's nuclear and missile threats on the rise, building up the South Korea-U.S. combined deterrent power and defensive strength is most important.
Due to the instability on the Korean peninsula and referring to North Korea's landmine provocation at the demilitarized zone last month, Denmark also agreed on building a strong South Korea-U.S. alliance.
These provocations are another reminder of how dangerous things can be here in the Korean peninsula and how a highly ready force in support of a very strong ally is absolutely necessary to keep the peace.
The timing of the annual defense meeting is significant as speculation grows that North Korea might launch a long-range rocket next month to commemorate the founding of the ruling Workers' Party. And this is why Seoul and Washington will discuss the 4D strategy that urges the allies to detect, defend, disrupt, and destroy North Korean ballistic missile threats during the talks. Seoul's defense ministry says that during the two-day meeting, Seoul and Washington will also discuss the agreed transfer of wartime operational control of South Korean forces and fine-tune the details of the security consultative meeting scheduled for November. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea's Special Warfare Command is planning to establish a covert unit specializing in taking out key North Korean military facilities.
That's right. Commander of the Special Warfare Command, Chang Yong-seok, during Wednesday's parliamentary audit, acknowledged the move but did not specify the targeted sites. Military officials say the commander's comments referred to North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile facilities, along with other key installations.
Chinese President Xi Jinping says Beijing and Washington must deepen each other's understanding and show mutual respect. This as he started his first day in the U.S. offering cooperation on tackling cybercrimes while reassuring investors of stable Chinese economy. Song Ji-sun reports.
A new model for a major-country relationship based on deeper understanding and reducing mistrust. That is the vision laid out by China's President Xi Jinping on his first state visit to the U.S. Warning that a clash between the world's two most powerful countries and biggest economies would result in disaster, Xi called on Washington to better understand each other's strategic intentions.
If China and the U.S. cooperate well, they can become a bedrock of global stability and a booster of world peace. Should they enter into conflict or confrontation, it would lead to disaster for both countries and the world at large.
Responding to Washington's allegations that China has been behind cyber attacks, Xi also pledged to cooperate with the U.S., stating Beijing is also a victim of such crimes.
China is a strong defender of cyber safety and also a victim of hacker attacks. The Chinese government, in whatever capacity, will not participate, encourage, and support anyone to commit commercial theft. China is willing to set up a high-level joint dialogue mechanism with the U.S. on fighting cyber crimes.
Xi also reassured the U.S. that the Chinese market has reached a phase of self-recovery and that it will maintain a stable and reasonable economic growth. He also stressed Beijing will not devalue its currency to boost exports, as it opposes a currency war, and remains committed to financial reforms and an open economy. Xi is scheduled to hold summit talks with his U.S. counterpart, Barack Obama, on Friday, where the two will delve into a number of issues, including ways to enhance cooperation towards denuclearizing Pyongyang. 송지선, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye will hold bilateral talks with the leaders of Pakistan and Denmark during her trip to New York for the United Nations General Assembly. The presidential office of Cheong Wa-dae said Wednesday the talks will focus on economic and climate change cooperation. The participation of Korean companies in Pakistan's infrastructure projects will be the focus of attention during the Korea-Pakistan summit, while cooperation in the pharmaceutical, wind power, and shipping industry will be up for talks in President Park's meeting with Denmark's Prime Minister.
A monument commemorating the victims of Japan's military sex slavery during World War II, euphemistically known as Comfort Women, will be set up in San Francisco. The city's Board of Supervisors unanimously passed a resolution on Tuesday to establish the memorial. Other similar memorials have been created in several locations across the U.S., including Glendale in California and Palisades Park in New Jersey. But this will be the first major city and international tourist destination to adopt one. Discussions will now start to determine the location and design of the monument.
Korea's top central banker has dismissed concerns that the domestic economy might grow in the low 2% range this year. Bank of Korea Governor Hwang Ji-hye said Wednesday that this year's growth will not deviate far from its 2.8% growth forecast, citing improving consumer spending that was hit hard by the MERS outbreak in the second quarter. He did add, though, that there could be a slight revision in the outlook set to be released next month. For years, Korea's per capita income has been a step away from the $30,000 level that would promote the country to a developed nation, according to a widely used standards. It was thought to be on course to break the barrier within the next 1 or 2 years, but that's looking less likely now. Our Kwon So-ah tells us why.
10 years ago, Koreans began to make more than $20,000 annually. But joining the 30-50 club, or countries with $30,000 in per capita income and 50 million people, may be difficult for them to achieve in the very near future. According to Standard & Poor's, the country is not expected to reach the $30,000 level before 2018, despite the agency's recent upgrading of Korea's credit rating from A+ to AA-. Domestic institutions' forecasts aren't that rosy either. In fact, LG Research Institute expects an on-year drop of $1,000 in 2016 from this year's $27,100. The Korea Economic Institute says Korea could become a developed nation by 2017, but only if it maintains its current growth level. But that's increasingly unlikely to happen, as faltering exports, a key driver of the economy, mainly caused by slowing growth in China, and other external factors such as volatile stock markets and uncertainty surrounding the timing of the U.S. Federal Reserve's planned rate hike, have led to a downgrading of growth expectations. Experts say to get closer to a $30,000 per capita income and eventually strive for $40,000, increased spending inside the country is key to make the leap from a developing to developed country.
Governmental policies such as tax reductions and deregulations in order for companies to invest more and boost private consumption are essential.
This especially as private consumption accounts for more than 50% of the country's GDP. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
A televised debate on how to reform Korea's rigid labor market was held on Wednesday between two rival party lawmakers who head their respective labor reform committees. Kim Young-gil takes us into the heat of that battle.
Lee In-jae, who heads the Saenuri Party's Labor Reform Committee, began the debate by praising the September 13th tripartite deal between labor management and the government.
The Grand Compromise is a historic agreement. The tripartite agreement will help overcome social and economic crisis at a time when the Korean economy is struggling.
However, Choo Mi-ae, who chairs the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Labor Reform Committee, says the deal violates the Constitution.
The agreement violates Korea's constitutional order. Such administrative procedures go against the principle of a constitutional state. Also, it cannot be a grand compromise when only one umbrella union participated.
The Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, one of Korea's two labor groups, neither participated in nor signed the deal. Instead, they insisted the government was trying to implement changes that would worsen labor market conditions and hurt people's livelihoods. At the heart of the heated debate was a trilateral commission's deal that would allow companies to easily fire negligent or underperforming workers.
The opposition is saying the agreement will easily allow the layoff of workers, but that's not true. We are working on the administrative procedures to prevent unfair dismissals of employees from their work.
Korea does not have an objective assessment system to evaluate workers. If we allow companies to easily lay off workers, then employees who are unable to go along with their superiors or women who come back from maternity leave could be targeted.
Chu said easily dismissing workers and extending the employment period of temporary workers was not the essence of labor reforms, as it would only instigate job instability. He stressed that it was now time for the National Assembly to do its part in legislating bills, while Chu emphasized that talks have just begun. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Turning our focus to the massive fallout from Volkswagen's diesel emissions fraud, the automaker has admitted cheating diesel vehicle emissions tests in the U.S., and the scandal is now spreading to Korea, with the government saying it will look into 4 models. Kim Min-ji reports.
Volkswagen's Golf, Jetta, Passat, and Audi's A3. These are the models subject to Korea's probe. The Transportation Ministry will conduct fuel efficiency tests on the models in question, while the Environment Ministry will conduct emission tests. It follows the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's announcement last week that the German automaker used a device that activates and controls harmful emissions during testing, concealing actual levels. So when a car is driven normally, emission levels surge to 40 times above what's permitted. Volkswagen Korea has yet to give an official response.
The headquarters in Germany is conducting an investigation. The Korean government has also announced it will probe into the situation, and we will follow their directions once the results are out.
The Environment Ministry says they are not ruling out the possibility of discovering the same anomaly in Korea and is vowed to start the probe next month. Regardless of the result, it's expected to deal a blow to the German carmaker. Volkswagen is one of the most popular imported car brands in Korea, accounting for more than 15% of the imported car sales so far this year.
The scandal will change the paradigm of the automobile market. It will have an impact on the sales of diesel cars. And while other car makers have said this scandal doesn't have anything to do with them, suspicions can't be ruled out.
But this could just be the beginning. Experts say Volkswagen could face recalls or suspension in sales, as well as lawsuits for environmental activists and also individuals if fuel efficiency has also been manipulated. In Germany, senior directors of the company are attending an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Volkswagen CEO apologized earlier for the deception and pledged a fast and thorough investigation while setting aside more than $7.2 billion to cover the fallout. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The Korean government aims to normalize the local tourism sector, which was largely affected by the MERS outbreak earlier this year, by providing more financial support and revamping the certification system of high-quality goods. For this report, we turn to our Kim Ji-yeon.
Korea's Culture Ministry is working towards the normalization of the local tourism industry, which was largely affected by the MERS outbreak earlier this year. The Culture Ministry said Wednesday that it'll inject an additional $109 million of supplementary budget on top of the $200 million it allotted as special loans in August. Those eligible to the loans can pay back the borrowed amount after a period of between 4 to 13 years with floating interest of under 2.3%. Conditions, the ministry says, are more favorable than those currently provided by local banks. The ministry added it'll improve the country's recognition of products considered to be the highest quality, especially traditional craftwork pieces, in order to further boost morale of the local cultural industry. The ministry unveiled a new certification mark to guarantee the authenticity and quality of items, with a consultative group to start working on the certificate's promotional strategies in December this year. The group, comprised of officials from the Korea Creative Content Agency and Korea Craft and Design Foundation, will be tasked with creating guidelines that will help select the products to bear the mark. Culture Minister Kim Jong-duk hopes the improved system will help maximize the country's potential in tourism and the export of culture-related goods and play a positive role in boosting the local economy. Data released by the Bank of Korea earlier this week shows sales of local businesses during the April to June period plunged more than 4% from the same period last year, largely due to the MERS outbreak. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Ahead of the emergency EU summit, interior ministers reached a breakthrough agreement to relocate some 120,000 migrants.
And for an in-depth look into the latest developments, we turn to Melinda Crane, reporter for Deutsche Welle. Welcome to our newscast, Melinda. First, let's start with the quota system that should be implemented. Could you clarify how feasible and effective it will be?
Well, the best case scenario from the perspective here in Berlin is that this represents a first step toward establishing the principle of fair distribution according to a formula that's based on countries' economic strength and also on the size of their population. But it has two big weaknesses. First of all, it was agreed by majority vote rather than by consensus. In practice, it's hard to imagine how we're going to be sending refugees to countries that have said from the beginning they don't want them. Secondly, this particular agreement covers just 120,000 refugees. That is a small fraction of the number that have been pouring across the borders of the EU. So it may be a beginning, it may establish that first principle of fair distribution, but there's still a long way to go.
Right, so these four Eastern European countries, other than the obvious reasons, what are some of the driving factors that's causing them to strongly oppose the EU's recent move?
Well, the first one is that these are countries whose economies are not very strong. They are among the newest members of the EU. They also haven't got a lot of experience with migrants, many of them with very, very small populations of people with a migration background. They would receive a per capita compensation from Brussels for the refugees that they take in. So those are two crucial factors. Another very, very important factor, politics. Many of these countries which are objecting are countries that have right-wing political movements. They, of course, do not want to give those movements any cause for grievance. Who you let into your country, that is an absolutely central element of national sovereignty. These countries are all countries that were emerged after the fall of the Iron Curtain. They're very concerned about their national sovereignty. It's still fresh for them, and therefore a lot of questions for them surrounding an order like this one.
But many experts fear, Melinda, that the chaos will continue unless more sophisticated reform measures are formulated. Will we see some positive improvements soon?
Well, as I say, I think that this agreement does represent a first step. It has a second element that we didn't talk about. Beyond the distribution agreement, there's also an agreement to set up registration centers at what are called the hot spots, where most of the refugees are coming in. That's in Greece, that's in Italy. This is absolutely crucial to fix the broken asylum system here in Europe. We need a comprehensive registration process at the first point of entry so that it's clear who among these migrants are actually entitled to political asylum and who among them are perhaps just looking for a better life economically. Because those people, the people in the second category, they do not have a right to be taken in by European countries. And it's very important to filter them out as soon as they get to the EU borders. So that's another very important step, one of the things that has to happen. But there's a lot of other work to be done as well in terms of who takes these migrants in, who pays for them, and how do we address the root causes of migration in the first place.
All right, thank you so much for your report, Melinda, reporting live from Berlin at the Deutsche Welle.
It's time for international news headlines. We turn to our Bruce Harrison at the News Center.
Today's focus, the Pope arrives in Washington following an historic visit to Cuba. Forest fires in Indonesia are causing health problems in the region, and a baseball legend known for his large ears and even large smile has died.
Well, Bruce, the most well-known religious leader in the world is in Washington. Could you tell us more about his arrival and his plans?
Daniel, once the pontiff stepped off his plane, that's Pope Francis, you could draw similarities to a rock concert. Crowds cheered, students chanted, and young women screamed as his motorcade traveled to his quarters in Washington. After all, this is his first visit to the United States, but he did add a modest touch to the pomp, hopping in the back of a Fiat 500L, a small, fuel-efficient car. Pope Francis will meet with U.S. President Barack Obama today and speak before Congress later this week. The Pope just came from Cuba, though he said he won't be discussing U.S.-Cuban relations on Capitol Hill.
My desire is that they end up with a good result, that they reach an accord that satisfies both sides. An accord, certainly.
The Pope largely avoided controversy during his trip to Cuba, where the government had hoped the world would condemn the U.S. economic embargo. The Pope will wrap up his visit to the U.S. with a speech before the United Nations General Assembly in New York and an open-air mass in Philadelphia. A growing haze over parts of northern Indonesia has led to serious health concerns in the country. The smoky blanket from forest fires has sent many to the hospital, and the country's disaster management agency said 120,000 people are suffering from acute respiratory tract infections. Most of the sick are children and the elderly. At least one doctor has said the haze is polluting water, causing an increasing number of cases of diarrhea.
The situation was really bad when my daughter was still in school. After the school was closed because of the haze, she was hospitalized immediately.
The haze also grounded many flights in the Southeast Asian country today, leaving passengers stranded and awaiting updates. The haze has grown so massively it's engulfed parts of Malaysia and Singapore as well. Major League Baseball has lost an all-time great. New York Yankees Hall of Fame catcher Yogi Berra has died. He was 90. The Yankees signed Berra for just $500 in 1942 and sent him to the team's minor league affiliates. He left baseball to fight in World War II and made the Yankees roster by 1947 after his return. After immense success as a player, Berra managed both the Yankees and the New York Mets to World Series appearances. And while known as a feared catcher and tough hitter, he was known just as well for his often quoted and sometimes odd sayings, lovingly dubbed Yogiisms. That's it for World News, and in the words of Yogi Berra, it gets late early out here. Have a good night.
While it was a cloudy day here in Seoul, it poured heavily in Jeju and some of the southern provinces. In fact, a heavy rain advisory was issued in Jeju as Seogwipo City received more than 100 millimeters of precipitation. And these rain clouds are expected to cover the southern regions until late at night. So Jeju and the southern coastal regions of the Gyeongsang-do provinces will get an additional 10 to 50 millimeters of showers, while other southern regions will see that somewhere between 5 to 30 millimeters. But all the rain should let up by tomorrow morning, and the upper parts of the country, including Seoul, will be under mostly sunny skies, and temperature readings will go up again as the daily high here in the capital will go up to 28. Gwangju will see a high of 26, while Daegu and Busan will be peaking to 24. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 27 and 25, while Dokdo peaks at 23. Now, the weather outlook for the rest of the week and through the Chuseok holiday seems to be relatively warmer, with cloudless skies expected, which will allow you to see the full moon easily. That's all for the weather. Good night.
And that's a wrap for us. Thank you for staying with us.
We will be back same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.